an introduction to the Dominion, apocalypse sighting, and how much is the cost of free advice. Hello and welcome to the Seventh Rule with Cirroc Lofton. My name is Ryan T. Husk, and we are reviewing Season 2, Episode 7 of Deep Space Nine called Rules of Acquisition, which is a very fun and interesting one for us since we love Ferengi and since the seventh rule is keep your ears open. How you doing,
Cirroc? I'm doing well. Rules of acquisition. They went over a few of them in this episode, which was, one of the fun moments, or several of the fun moments, the back and forth of acquisitions. And then, of course, we've got keep your ears open, the seventh rule. So, we have a special kinship to the rules of acquisition.
I've heard of that rule.
So, I mean, it was a really Ferengi centered episode. We were just talking about the fact that our guy, Mr. Aron Eisenberg, wasn't in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
And something I kind of was expecting to see him around the corner, just maybe in a scene with his dad, or just being in the background in some kind of way, just involved in the storyline. But this is before they started to really have him, involved in more Quark-related storylines. They actually like to separate the Quark and Nog storylines a lot.
That's true.
And when you saw how eager Nog was to make a deal with the No-J Consortium and to to hustle his way up to making some gold press latinum, you kind of saw the similarities in his character to Quark, right? That ambition to be successful, to hustle, which is the Ferengi trait, right? So you would think that he could be incorporated in different ways, in some other ways, but he wasn't, and we'll just deal with what we have. You mentioned what is the cost of what was you opened?
What's the cost of free advice?
Oh yes, free advice is seldom cheap.
Nailed it. This guy knows his rules of acquisition.
There it is.
Gentlemen, those of you at home that thought you're going to have to wait 50 minutes to find out the answer to that one, Cirroc knocks it out in the first minute.
Yeah, I wrote it down. It stood out. I actually had to rewind it. I was like, oh, that's funny. Free advice is seldom cheap. And that normally is the case, right? You give somebody advice and then they blame you for everything that goes wrong in their life.
Well, and I think that's kind of the underlying brilliance of the rules of acquisition is that every single one of them makes a point that is valid. You know what I mean? Like they're not just like bullshit things that are just thrown out here and there. Every one of them makes sense, at least in some way. You go, oh yeah, that makes sense. Or I've experienced this little tidbit of knowledge. That is rule number 59 of the rules of acquisition. Free advice is seldom cheap. It's a good one.
Yeah, I like that. And then that actually began the kind of interplay between Quark and this
Pell,
this undercover female Ferengi.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that little interchange that they had because it was kind of a one-ing up of, who knows more about how to hustle people. And, she held her own with Quark and, to the point where she impressed him, wise men can yield profit in the wind.
Yeah. That was the 22nd rule of acquisition.
Right. So that was pretty cool. I also saw that they brought Dax into kind of the company of the Ferengi playing the game that they were playing, that roulette type of game. And that was interesting, I thought, the kind of melding of this unlikely friendship. What did you think about that?
Yeah, well, I thought that was perfect. And right now I'm trying to remember what that game is called. And as soon as I remember, I'm going to be very sad at myself for not remembering. Because I was looking at this other stuff. Tongo, of course. So they're playing, she's playing Tongo with the Ferengi. And I thought it was a perfect fit because Jadzia is the right character to blend in with other aliens, because no matter what alien it is, unless it's like Gamma Quadrant aliens, one of her lives has had experience with them. She's always like, oh, Klingons, I know these guys, or oh, I know these old Ferengi. I love their game. She's kind of like the cool girl at the bar that knows more about your favorite team than you do, and you're like, how the did
Yeah.
And then she had 7 previous lives. She's like, oh, my 4th boyfriend loved the Eagles or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny because she actually has a legitimate case for sexual harassment on this show.
Oh my God. And Kira too.
And Kira too. And it was like,
and Quark.
It's just and Quark. Quark would be the one getting slapped with his suit along with Dr. Bashir. So far, Odo and Captain Sisko are the only 2 that know how to.
The last 2 men women standing already.
Yeah, the only guys that are real true gentlemen.
Yeah.
But everybody else, you saw Column's character. O'Brien was like, "Hey, what do you think about those girls?" I think they were offering those girls in the one episode that we saw earlier. I can't remember the title of it, but it's
or like, when what's her name, Keiko says, watch where you stick your Jamja stick.
Yeah, exactly. So
it's like, I'll put it wherever I want.
Yeah. So there's always these little hints, and then this was just once again another example of that, where it was just a little bit overt. I think the line is, I could probably think better without your hand on my thigh. That was what Dax says to Quark.
Mm-hmm.
And he very funnily says, "Oh, how did I get there?" Wow,
what do you
had no idea. What do you know? And then she goes on to say to you, "Is that how you like your women, naked and submissive?" And he's like, "Yeah, pretty much." So it's
the Ferengi way. Yeah,
it's the Ferengi way, and it was actually funny in this instance. It wasn't unbearable. It was actually kind of comical.
It does bring up kind of a point now that you think about it. Is now look, that's the Ferengi culture. It's completely accepted on their planet and in their culture and in their empire, and it's completely not in ours or in the Federation's in this case. And where do you draw the line between a foreign culture, foreign group of people coming into your culture and doing something that is totally unacceptable? Like, do they say, like, if they say, Ferengi say, oh, sorry, that's just perfectly acceptable in our world. And you say, yeah, but you're not on your world. The line is here. You can't cross it. You can't touch women. You can't talk to them that way, this and that. That's what we would expect. Or are they a little bit more tolerant and go, it's okay, he's a Ferengi? I think we tend to say it's the former, where you say, sorry, dude, not on this space station. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I think Discovery dealt with this. What is the Prime Directive on as far as Starfleet is concerned?
Yeah, the Prime Directive is that they do not interfere in underdeveloped worlds. They don't interfere in the development of any races or cultures that have not reached warp drive. And the reasoning behind that is once they've reached warp drive, they're going to be exposed to all the other cultures anyway, because they're going to go out and explore and see them all. But until they discover warp drive, they're this secluded planet, and you got to leave them alone. That's
okay. So Ferengi wouldn't really qualify as that, because I think they have achieved warp drive as a civilization. Yeah, this is just a matter of cultural things and identity. It's part of tradition. It's part of who they are and what makes them who they are. No less than some of the outrageous Klingon rituals and behaviors, right? So we look at it through the lens of our own Western civilization, upbringing, and societal norms when we talk about these things. But yes, when you're dealing now in an interplanetary, galactic way, it would change the terms. It's like, for example, extraterrestrials coming to this planet, and when they get off their spaceship, we're like, critiquing them for, are you wearing a dress, man? Like who would
It's not a dress, Dick. It's a kilt. Whatever, dude.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it would be like one of those things. That would be the last thing you would actually have a conversation about, is like how that alien is treating his alien friend next to him, right?
Yeah.
You'd be more like, hey, how do we engage? What do we have to talk about? What are you here for?
Yeah. Are you guys the ones that slaughter our cows, by the way?
Yeah. Those circles. Are you having to do with those circles?
Is that you or Jimbo out in Kansas?
So that would be the thing to be asking them. And I think that'd be the more relevant thing, because here they are having established a way of life, right? It would be kind of silly for us to kind of impose our traditions on an entire different species of existence, right? We don't tell, even on our own planet, we don't tell other species how to behave, right?
We're not supposed to, yeah.
We're not supposed to, but you don't look into the wild and say, hey, look at those buffalo. They shouldn't be kicking it together. So let's separate them.
All right, you two, break it up.
Yeah. Look how they're treating each other.
Yeah.
So we kind of let things go in that kind of a way, unless it infringes upon other people's, freedoms and beliefs.
The point, yeah, is basically do whatever you want. Live your best life. Do, as the kids say, really follow your culture till your heart's content. But as soon as it starts affecting somebody else negatively, that's where the conversation begins of, well, should you regulate that or not? And in this case, Quark or Zek's hand on Kira or Dax, that's beyond just kind of doing whatever you want to do, because now you're bringing somebody else in it that doesn't want that. And that if Sisko wasn't in charge, Kira would have cut that guy's hand off completely.
Yeah.
He would have taken care of that so fast.
Yeah. And it's funny because there were a few moments, like you're talking about when the Nagus was making his move on Kira, right?
Oh, how did that get there?
Yeah, another move, right? And by the way, I want to give a special shout out to the Grand Nagus, Mr. Wallace Shawn. Is that his name?
Yes, exactly. Yeah. The Sicilian in Princess Bride that we love so much.
Oh, man, we love him in Princess Bride, right? For those of you that are our age, we grew up on a movie like, that movie 20s. With, Andre the Giant and Mr. Wallace Shawn and Princess Buttercup. It was pretty... It was a pretty good story, and also featured Columbo, right?
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he's actually starts the whole story with reading the book to Fred Savage.
Got it.
In the beginning of the movie.
I didn't realize that was Columbo.
Yeah, Peter Falk. So
on that note, real quick, bummer for Fred Savage. He had a really cool new comedy series out called Friends from College with Michael Key, that fellow, and another dude, this tall dude, I can't remember his name, but anyway, called Friends from College. It lasted 2 seasons, just got canceled. Real bummer. Very well written. Check it out. If you're into things that get canceled. But anyway, what were you saying?
Yeah, I like Fred Savage. I thought I've always kind of followed him throughout after Wonder Years, right?
Loved it, yeah.
Love Wonder Years. And he also had a show called The Office, I think it was called, or Office.
I don't know about that, but I know he was in...
Working? It was called Working.
Like a dog one where he was like... He had an imaginary dog, or he was an imaginary... I don't know.
That one. I understand why that one got canceled, but no, he's always been. I like his acting, and he's been a good guy in the business for a long time.
Definitely,
growing up as a child actor. But they mentioned here in this episode, one thing that they came up with was the 185 rules. Is it the total number of rules of acquisition? I think I heard that.
I remember them talking about it, but I didn't write that down or memorize. I think it's something like that. It's something either in the late hundreds or low 200s. And then they said, and then there's like some addendums too.
Right, exactly. They refer to them addendums. The other thing I liked was the negotiating between Sisko and Nagus in the main ops there.
Yeah, he did some negotiation.
He did some negotiation. I like that. It was a nice little back and forth between them.
Okay, the answer is real quick: 285 rules of acquisition.
285. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. And there was actually a book, right? If I'm not mistaken, the Rules of Acquisition book.
Yeah, and I have it, and I'm ashamed to say I didn't. Oh no, wait. It says there were 173 rules in the mid 22nd century, and by the 24th century, there were 285. So I don't know what they exactly said on that episode. Maybe it was somewhere in between, but that's what it is now. But yeah, there is a book for it.
Oh, the other thing that I was going to say was, and this was in reference to the Ferengi culture and how they treat their women, right? The big thing I was going to say was, if the Ferengi women were not happy with that setup, right, and they didn't like that way of life, then I think it would be oppression, right? Then it would be appropriate to speak up on their behalf if they were not happy with that lifestyle, if they didn't like the way they were being treated, and they wanted certain rights and freedoms for their own. If that was the case, then yes, I feel it would be appropriate to speak in favor or speak out against what the Ferengi were doing to their women.
Yeah,
but if it's a cultural thing and there's no problem with it, and there's only this one-off case with this one character that didn't like that life and wanted to change, but everybody else is fine with it, then I would deal with it the way they dealt with it, which is in this kind of singular lens, this one isolated issue. And clearly, the Ferengi's system of dealing, of this interrelation system, wasn't so much so that it overruled Quark's humanity. And at least in this particular incident, he still had empathy. He still showed signs of feelings, right? Of actual intimate feelings. So it didn't restrict his humanity. It didn't make him become more of a jerk. It just was outside of cultural norms and something that he accepted as being cool for that situation.
You raised a good point about what that culture is happy with. It's like, who are we to change somebody else's culture if that's what they like? And there are 2 points to that. Number one is that, as we'll see later on in the further seasons of Deep Space Nine, there are more women, female Ferengi, that are standing up and saying, "Hey, we want to wear clothes now. We want to do business," including Moogie, including Rom and Quark's Moogie, and Nog's Grand Moogie. I don't know if that's what he calls her. But also, we see that in our world, there are some cultures that when we look at them, we're saying, hey, they're oppressing women. That's bad. Let's make them change that. But then the flip side of that is that they say, well, what if we're happy this way? What if we don't want you changing things? So it's kind of like a strange conversation there, where when we see it, we automatically think that's oppression, that's bad, don't treat them that way. And they're saying, well, it's not oppression to us if that's what we want. I don't know what the answer is, but there's that parallel 25 years ago in Deep Space Nine to what we're seeing now.
Yeah, we see the same thing. I mean, just to draw an example, and this is not to say that this is directly related, but it's a similar example. You look at something like Sharia law and how how women are expected to behave underneath that system, and some of those people are cool with it. They're like, hey, this is how it's been for generations in my family. This is how I was raised, and I'm okay with covering myself and living life in this kind of a way. And so when you start to impose your own belief system on somebody, so much so that they have to abandon theirs, then that's where the problem is. Now, but if somebody themselves is feeling oppressed and is voicing, their opposition to the way things are, then those voices should be heard and respected and listened to
and defended.
Yeah. So I think it's that kind of a delicate of a balance, right?
It really is. Yeah. I don't know exactly what the answer is, but you're right. That's exactly what I was referring to. It's like in Sharia law, like, I think in Saudi Arabia, they just recently passed something where like women could drive or vote or just
I think driving is what they did.
Something like that, And so you have a movement where they're saying, hey, we want to be more like the West. We want to have equality. And then there are others that are saying, this is how it's always been. I'm happy this way. Leave us alone. And we're like, I don't know what to do.
Yeah, if somebody wants to be left alone, I typically leave them alone.
Exactly.
Because you're causing problems when you don't, right?
Yeah, you're making them unhappy.
Yeah, and you could also force a set of circumstances that actually turns out more harmful for the person than them just being left alone. So yeah, I can understand it, and like I said, I think it only becomes a problem once it affects other people's freedoms and rights and liberties, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as that infringes on somebody else, then
that's when you have a conversation about it.
Then we have to have a conversation about it. Absolutely.
Exactly. That's what I completely agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. But a willing, consensual adult who's cool with it, then I have nothing to say.
This is the tamest subject matter that I would ever think you'd say the sentence between two willing, consensual adults. Like I've never thought I would. Never mind. I'll leave that. I'm going to go ahead and move on from my own point there. We only have about a minute or two left before we go to the break. So I did want to also bring up not just those kind of important things to discuss, but also that this episode had what my inner nerd really likes. And I know there are a lot of other Star Trek fans that are like me in this, but I really, really am interested in seeing the other races, seeing the Dominions and the Confederations and the Consortiums and the all these different things. And we finally get our first taste of that in a multitude of ways. We see, we get an inside look into Ferengi and their rules and their traditions and their cultures. And my Hardu, who's this other race, I don't even know what he is, that tall dude, in the Ferengi Alliance, I think is what their group of planets is called. And then we also get our very first taste of what's in the Gamma Quadrant. And there's the Bosai, which we can talk about. And there's the first.
Was it Bosai or Dosai?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Dosai. And I actually wanted to talk about how many different ways that thing was said. It was, I counted 3 different ways that 4-letter word was said. Okay. But we also get the very first mention of the Dominion.
Yeah, we have to get into that too. That was pretty well done as far as the writing is concerned. So subtly mentioned, and just a little drop of it. Mm-hmm. We have no idea what we're getting into.
I know. Idea. Well, we kind of do now, but
we do.
Yeah.
But at this present timeline on the show, it's just
no clue.
Business as usual. The Ferengi are looking to get a stronghold in the Gamma Quadrant marketplace, right? And that's how they introduced this Dominion, and it's so great. I think it's wonderful writing because it's not hit over the head. There's no forecast of it, what we're about to get into. I don't know if it's going to be good or bad. And so it's just brilliantly introduced as far as I'm concerned for the writers. It's so subtle, but it's also like, oh, tell me more. Like, who is this person?
Totally.
What's going to happen?
Yeah. And it also shows that this is just the beginning of season 2. That means right after season 1, they were already looking at bigger and better things. And they were saying, let's create something called the Dominion. Let's start planting the seeds here and there and there and there. And, as we know, it only grows from there. Pretty awesome. Let's talk about it right after the break. We're going to be right back with the 7th rule of acquisition. Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the 7th rule with Cirroc Lofton. We are reviewing season 2, episode 7 of Deep Space Nine, called The Rules of Acquisition, directed by David Livingston. I also want to give a quick shout out to our associate producers, Imo Radka, Rex Wood, Dennis Koch, and Commander Homer Frizzell.
Commander Homer Frizzell.
I think he said he wanted to be called Commander.
Yeah, well, he's got it. He's got it. No, but we were going to talk about this Dozai, and it was funny because they look like basically a Domino's pizza logo.
That's why I got so hungry.
The
that just reminds me, I saw something today online that the founder of Little Caesars Pizza apparently was paying for Rosa Parks's rent for years, and nobody knew it.
Wow.
Just found that out today. I mean, I guess I didn't fact check it, but it seemed pretty legit. So I still don't like Little Caesars Pizza, but I like the person that founded it, I guess.
Well, you hear good things like that, and it's pretty amazing, right? I mean,
it is.
Especially when they go untalked about. I remember when we were doing the show, the guy who was our hair guy, he did Avery and I's hair. His name is Ron Smith.
Huh. The first few years or the last few years? Because the last few years was an easier job, I think, right?
Yeah, it was the first few years.
Okay.
And Ron started with us in the beginning. He's actually somebody that Avery brought along for the ride. Somebody he had known before and worked with before on other shows. Because
Avery had some pull.
Avery had pull, and obviously he wanted to have somebody that he knew around him, working with him. So I got a chance to meet Avery's friend, the late great Ron Smith.
Mm-hmm.
And Ron was an amazing hairdresser. He came from the long, old school Duke Ellington days, and he was actually Duke Ellington's hairdresser.
Wow.
So flash forward, Ron Smith ended up getting sick, and he was dying and was hospitalized for months during the show. He actually handpicked his replacement, a guy named Brian Andrew, who finished the rest of the show after Ron passed away. But one thing that we learned, and I didn't know this till afterwards and way later, was that that Avery was taking care of his hospital expenses and
really,
towards the end. And he didn't brag about it, didn't talk about it. It was just that's his guy, and he took care of his bills and made sure that he had his own room so that his family could be with him in a private setting. And so he upgraded his whole situation and made sure that he checked out nice and classy and in style. So I thought that was something to bring up about Avery's character as well.
I got to say, from an outsider's point of view, the most surprising thing about that story is that it's not surprising. You know what I mean? Like, we kind of know Avery's a high character guy. So hearing stuff like that, even though it's beautiful and surprising, we're just kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. That's the kind of guy Avery is.
It is the kind of guy he is. And, you brought up the Caesar's Pizza and the kind of charity work that he did. And there's all type of stories like this, people who have helped other people out in times of need. And it's just great. It's great that we can do that for each other. And we need more stories like that kind of circulating so people can get that good feeling about sharing each other's successes, and giving back and taking care of those people that deserve it, those people that are real heroes.
And you said his name was Ron Smith, right?
Yep. Ron Smith. Shout out to Ron Smith.
One letter away from being He Hate Me. Anybody know? Remember He Hate Me? Rod Smith.
Rod Smith.
The XFL, like 20 years ago, there was a guy named He Hate Me, and he ended up making...
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, nobody cares about that except for...
No, XFL is very short-lived.
It's coming back, though, next year. So stay tuned for the XFL.
Part 2.
But this is a Star Trek.
You know what I wanted to bring up really quickly, though? Back to the Star Trek world.
Oh, okay, good idea.
Was the Grand Nagus pulling out his snuff box and doing 2 lines of blow right in front of Captain Sisko?
Those beetles, right? The blood beetles or whatever. Yeah.
I thought that was like, what did he do? Did he just offer some snuff to Captain Commander Sisko?
Yeah, you want some of this? Suit yourself.
Exactly. He does 2 lines and goes crazy. Give it. Where's my? Hurry up! I was like, this guy is like Scarface. It's hilarious. That was funny to me. That just interaction, and then the Tula berries. Was it Tula berries? Yeah, Tula berry wine. We were talking about the dozai, the Tula berry. I guess the black market Tula berry dealers. And what did you think about this? I mean, how big was that guy? I mean, he looked like a bodybuilder, right?
The dosai guy? Well,
yeah.
I did want to bring him up because that is, I think the actor's name is Brian Johnson. I think I put that in my notes somewhere. Brian Johnson was also a baseball player's name. But again, nobody cares. And he is an actor that you can definitely recognize him. You've seen him in other Star Trek roles. He's got like this recognizable jaw. I think he played a Romulan in the 2009 JJ movie, and I think he might have done other things. But when you see that jawline that he has, he's got a very recognizable face, and they've used him before. And yeah, he was a big dude, intimidating. The lady that was with him was big and intimidating.
Yeah, she was too. Absolutely.
I read a little bit about the Dosai just because, they're a new race as far as we know. And they were originally described as reptilian race. But I think that they're like, dude, we have way too many Dosai characters in that one scene. We can't turn them all into lizard people. Let's just give them like scales on their head, like a hoodie with scales on it,
Yeah.
And then they gave them painting on their face, which was apparently inspired by the South Pacific and Borneo. Like Borneo, Malaysia, Indonesia, French Polynesia. They have that same kind of Domino's pizza, I guess.
The bright red and the blue and the white dots.
Exactly. Right. So that's what they ended up going with. It's really fascinating, kind of how they come up with these guys. And yeah, the dude and the lady were.
Well, that their hairpiece or their headdress that they were wearing with the scaly kind of iridescent colors that it was light up. It reminded me, actually, it looked like I wrote down in my notes Viking, like that. I got the sense of the Viking kind of look, and then I also thought of the Knights Templar and how they would wear these kind of wire mesh metal.
I was thinking more like Cher, but
Well, Cher would work too. Okay, Cher would work too. That's a little less historical and more entertainment. But yes.
Shout out to all of our Star Trek fans that also like Cher. I know a few.
Do you believe? All right, that's enough of that.
Life after love.
There it is. There it is. I set you up.
So, so Star Trek. Boy, this is a fun one because there's so many things to talk about. But what I really liked was seeing these new races, and like you were talking about a little bit earlier, we see the Dosai, and then they start saying who you really want to talk to is the Kamara, or who was it?
Right. This is where they first introduced the Dominion, right?
Yeah, he says you want to talk to the Karama, and he says and they said, who's that? And they said they are an important power in the Dominion. And we go, who's the Dominion? It's like you're just getting this little string that you're kind of pulling. And you're like, what? Then suddenly it's going to be attached to like a giant tank.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's really cool.
I thought that Quark would have got his butt kicked when he flipped over the barrel. I thought he was definitely, because they were kicking butt the whole time, this Dosai race, right? They actually introduced the race with throwing somebody out of the airlock and landing at Sisko's feet, right? It was like, that was the introduction of this race. Like they were like the SS of the Gestapo, they weren't playing any games over there. So I thought, okay, this is really going to be bad for Quark. He's going to get his ass beat, right? And turned out he didn't. He was doing his little negotiating thing, which ended up leading us to the Dominion part, which was really a nice little segue. What do you have to say about the kissing scene and the two Ferengis that whole coming on to Quark.
Yeah, well,
because he kind of wanted just to avoid it and not deal with it.
That was so funny when he's like, "We didn't kiss." he just like, did not happen.
I don't know what you're talking about, Your Honor. Yeah,
but
that was funny.
I mean, for us watching at home, my first thought in that opening scene was, "That's a woman." Like you can immediately tell it's a woman, of course. Like, at least I could. Like, there was just something different. The voice was different, the stature was different. Now, of course, that's not always a certainty because Nog was shorter too, but it just seemed like a woman. Now, putting all that aside, this was a really good episode to bring up those kinds of issues. I mean, again, we say this so many times, Star Trek and Deep Space Nine and Next Generation, they bring up so many really good discussion pieces every episode, more than one. And one was obviously, that what we've talked about with the cultural things. Another one is with the gender roles. But then there was also the one which is, there's something that people are talking about right now. There's a saying that people are saying, love is love. As in, it doesn't matter if, a guy loves another guy, or if a guy loves another woman, or if a guy loves a woman that used to be a guy, or whatever. Love is love, and again, Deep Space Nine was 26 years ahead of its time because Quark kissed what presumably was a man in his mind,
right?
Because he got swept up in the emotion of what a great team they were, how much he felt for that person. Whatever the reason behind it was that it kind of opened Quark's eyes as a character where, things are so rigid, man and women shouldn't do this. And he was just swept up by this thing. And it's flipping him for a loop in so many ways. Suddenly, women can negotiate as well or better than any guy he's known. Suddenly he kissed what he thought was a dude because of how amazing this woman was. There was a lot to chew on there. And I think there was most to chew on for the characters, and in this case, Quark. And so we can see that character being forced to grow right before our eyes.
I think you said it very well. Definitely, they addressed this issue without making it messy, right? And they also showed the difficulty that, and I want to get this female Ferengi character's name right. What was her name? Pel. They showed the difficulty how Pel was wrestling with coming forward with the truth, right? And it reminds me of people who are dealing with, coming out of the closet or dealing with some kind of personal issue that they haven't revealed to their family or friends, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the difficulty was really well showcased on this episode, that kind of, wrestling with how to say what I want to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to say this thing and I want to say this, and I'm really adamant about it, but I just don't know how to get the words out. And I thought that Dax also played a very good bridge character for us to get inside of the head of Pel, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sit her down and say, yeah, I know this, and don't worry. And,
it's a good point. Yeah.
It's going to be okay, which a lot of people need to hear in those kinds of circumstances. But I thought that Quark showed a maturity towards the end of this episode. There was a line where he said something like, if you want to dress like a man, then act like one and take the profits, right? And take the money, right?
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
And, but he was really saying, I care about you. Because Quark doesn't part with anything, right?
That's right.
He doesn't give one bar away. So he was really saying, here, I care about you. This will help you out. And thank you for opening my eyes, right? Mm-hmm. To a whole lot of different things. And in his way, without really getting too sentimental about it, but he did start to soften up towards the end when he, actually came in defense of Pel in front of the Grand Nagus and said, well, if you're gonna do that, if you're gonna punish her, then you're gonna go down for hiring her as a consultant. And
stupidity is no excuse.
Exactly, stupidity is no excuse. And you took the words right out of my mouth, which was great. It was great because it showed now Quark was on the other side and now defending Pel's character and right to be and do whatever she was doing at that moment, right? The riskier the reward, the greater the profit. But yeah, those were the big takeaways. And once again, DS9, fabulously tells several different stories. They got to the Dominion by going through this, Tola berry wine, right? Which was completely a front just to find out who the main source of who's in control, right? Who's the boss?
Really smartly written, yeah.
Right. I mean, you've seen this kind of play out in movies, and I want to say, like in drug movies, you see a guy saying, "Hey, I want to buy a whole lot of drugs." Well, their local dealer doesn't have all that access, right? So by saying,
"I got a guy,"
you got a guy, but we'll save that for the for the investigation. No, but it's. But it leads up, right? The more volume you get, you're like, hey, I need a million of this or whatever, and that's when you get to the boss. Right? Well, I can't supply that, but the boss got it, and we see that play out usually in drug movies. But for them to really cleverly intertwine that into this storyline, I thought was good. I thought that was a good play for the writers, and I also thought it was funny that Rom finally had somebody that he could pick on, because he's always on the receiving end of the jokes and the scrutiny. And finally, he was telling Pel, "You're fired. You're fired. Get out of here. You're fired." And picking on the waiters that were below him, like, "Take this and go." And
that's going to be less and less often as time goes on, because his character becomes like nicer and nicer and nicer as it goes on. Remember, in the first couple episodes, he just called us he's called, I think, pit boss Ferengi, where he's just like, get on out of here,
right,
like shooing him away. But yeah,
so as we go, it'll be less and less. That's what you're saying.
Definitely, because the character becomes nicer and nicer and more thoughtful. Whereas originally he's kind of like, the grumpy, Ferengi, typical Ferengi, like what you saw.
Well, Lita hasn't showed up yet, right? So he doesn't have her in his life yet, and he's, I think she changes him to some degree, if I'm not mistaken, right?
That's right. Shout out to Chase Masterson.
Yeah.
I think that might be her first mention on our show.
Yeah, it might be, but she deserves a mention because she's very closely tied into this Ferengi storyline, right? And
totally.
and then we go further into, as we were discussing just now, how Ferengi men treat their women culturally, and we're going to see another antithesis of that stereotype play out with Lita and Rom, right?
Rom being so enlightened, he's like the most enlightened of all the Ferengi by the end of it. Yeah,
right. So she's not forced to subject herself to all these, walk around to being naked and chewing food and, staying in the house. Right.
Yeah.
So I think they show a lot of progress as far as dealing with issues of sex, dealing of issues of gender, of race. We're starting to get all of these things really play out heavily. And I'm excited to find out how the Dominion rolls out.
Yes.
Right? How are they going to roll out? Who's going to be the representative? What's that interchange going to be like? And so I'm excited actually to see where we're going to go from here.
Yeah, I forgot how early on they mentioned the Dominion. I mean, this is the beginning of the second season again, and that's it. We are now, dipping our toes into the pool that is like, turns out to be an ocean, basically. So it's really exciting. And, I also want to mention, speaking of the other aliens, that I mentioned at the beginning, we've got a Pokled sighting. Pokleds are an alien race that came up in the Next Generation, and they're basically just the big dumb idiots of the galaxy, right?
Okay.
And we'll have to check them out on Next Generation, but they're just like, and we saw two of them in the background of Quark's bar. And again, my inner nerd and a lot of Star Trek fans I know are like me, where we're watching an episode and we go, hey, there's a couple Pockleds back there. Check it out. There's the Pockleds. I know those guys. They make the engine go. They make the ship go. It was like a funny thing where they're really dumb, but they play even dumber than they're like the Next Generation crew. They run into these guys that like need help, and they're like super stupid, and they're like, we need help, fixing our engine. And they're like, where's engineer makes our ship go? They're like really dumb. So Geordi goes over there to help them, and he's just like, oh my God, these guys are so stupid. But it turns out that they're just slightly smarter than that, because they were just pretending, and so that they could capture him and then make him do all the stuff for them and whatever like that. But they're still dumb. But anyway, so they were in the bar. And
they were playing dumber just to get what they wanted done, which is actually pretty smart.
Yeah. So of course the irony is that, and what made it so funny was they're like, we just got played by these idiots. We just got fooled by these fools,
right? The other thing is we had a Mark Allen Shepard. Morn was in the beginning.
Opening shot. Yeah, you're right.
Opening shot. So we got a view of him, and it's funny because when I watched him in that shot, Morn seems like larger than life, right? He seems like he's like 6'6", 300 pounds, like he could be a lineman for a football team, but he's not that big. When you see Mark in person, he's just a normal guy, right? So it's funny to me.
I don't know if I've ever seen him in person.
Oh, I've seen him, many times. He's a normal sized guy. He's no bigger than anybody else, regular sized person.
He looks like a big turtle. Morn does, not
yeah, he does.
Mark looks like a human.
But I wonder how big this outfit is that he's wearing. Like, what padding is in it to make him look so much wider and so much larger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That popped out of my head. But I wanted to ask you, when Kira gets a gift from this alien who pops up on the bridge and decides to hand her this earring or necklace or something. What alien? What was that alien?
I don't even remember that part. Was that in this episode?
Yeah, there was a scene. Okay. So it's the alien, I believe, that's escorting the Grand Nagus.
Oh, that's right. Okay, that's Mayhardu, the super tall guy, right?
Yeah, and the one who gave him the handkerchief when he was sneezing in Sisko's.
Exactly. His name is Mayhardu, and I don't remember what kind of alien that is, and I know that there's like 1,000 nerds right now going like, it's obviously whatever it is.
Well, I have no idea. That's why I'm asking, because here he is. He walks on, he hands her something, and then he walks away. A gift from the Grand Nagus, right?
I don't know if I ever knew he's called the race is called a Hyperion or Hooperion.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So that's the guy I was mentioning before when I was saying it's cool to see like different races within the empires. In the Ferengi Alliance, there's the Ferengi, there's the Hooperion people. They're kind of like servants or the bellhops of the Ferengi Alliance or whatever. Yeah. But yeah, that's what he is.
And then they specialize in doing ear haircuts, right?
Played by a man named Tiny Ron, if I remember correctly. Tiny Ron.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so here's the Nagus is getting his ear hairs, permed, I guess. Waxed. And that looks great. So, yeah, there was a lot of little things in this episode that I thought were great. And it also, it's funny because I keep wanting more of Sisko driven theme lines and plots.
Mm-hmm.
And
he was only in a couple scenes, yeah.
Yeah, he was only in a couple scenes, and I just feel like there's so much that they started out with that they haven't touched yet. Still, I mean, they started off by telling us about the prophets and the wormhole, and Sisko is the emissary, and then now he's been kind of on the sidelines as the Bajoran storylines play out, as the Ferengi storylines play out. And all these other storylines are playing out, and I don't see him actually. I mean, he's there, he's involved, right? but he's not the center points of as many episodes as you would think by this point.
That's right. And now, shows like Discovery, it's it's very focused on a main character, whereas traditionally Star Trek, and I feel like original series with Kirk and Spock was also very focused on Kirk and also focused on the triad of Kirk and Spock and Bones. But Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, one of the reasons why it's so well written, I think, with Deep Space Nine is that they're just planting all these seeds everywhere. First, they introduce us to Sisko, and then they're introducing us to all these different characters in the first season. Then the second season, they're introducing us to the more secondary and tertiary things, like here's what the Ferengi storyline, is happening, what's going on over here. Then there's, the Gamma Quadrant kind of stuff. And then there's also the Bajorans. They're peppering in all these different elements and these other subplots and B plots. But all the while, each episode is still an episode. It still has a message, it still has a story, it still has a theme. And so then by the time we're in the third season, it goes a little bit more back into the Sisko show, where he's definitely the main guy, but they've built the whole world around him and around Deep Space Nine. It's like this rich canvas, It's really awesome. Really well done.
And before we close out this episode, I do want to bring one thing up that I believe is completely overlooked. We saw Odo in this episode. It was a small cameo of Odo. Yeah. I think it was just one scene. But just even that one scene was enough to kind of bring back all these memories about the wonderful work that the late, great Rene Auberjonois gave us for 7 years on our show. And I just want to make sure that we highlight that, we pray for his family and we honor his memory and the good work that he left us with.
Yeah, and more than just the mention, I definitely want us to talk all about that on the free for all that'll be coming up in just a minute. I want to talk about what people thought of Rene, of Odo, of their favorite Odo moments, because it's a huge loss, and people loved him, and a lot of people kind of knew it was coming, but it doesn't make it any less painful. And there's so many people right now in the Star Trek world that are grieving his loss, yourself included, and many of our friends. So yeah, thanks for bringing that up, and let's definitely talk about him, because I don't really know him, but by all accounts, he was an incredible man.
Yeah, and I didn't get the pleasure of working with him as much as other cast members did. Guys like Nana did, and Armin, obviously.
Yes.
So they had a lot closer working relationship with Rene, but we're all part of this big family, and we all suffer when one of us goes out. We all feel the pain. Mm-hmm. And Odo was fabulous on our show and did a remarkable job, and he will always be remembered for the character, for the Odo character. I think Rene will always be honored for that, and thanks for giving us that. Those good times, those good memories.
And we're already out of time, but just to touch on it a little bit more, something I did kind of want to mention as well before we get into the free for all was how much from day one, Aron would talk about how impressed he was with Rene's portrayal of Odo. From the very first episode all the way through the whole first season before Aron also left us, he was always talking about Odo and Quark as well, but how impressed he was with Rene. And he was right, and everybody echoes those sentiments, especially like Nana, Armin, and Terry, the people that worked with him very closely. They considered him a mentor and a friend, and the avid professional.
And to all the listeners out there, the DS9 documentary has a totally different
resonance when you watch it now. It means that much more that we've lost these really great people, and now their lasting legacy and their last kind of on-screen memory will be encapsulated in that documentary. So I'm glad that Ira was able to get that, get those interviews in, and get those people to talk on camera, for what we now know was the last time.
Yeah, and as you said to me a few times, you can tell when you're watching that documentary that Rene is kind of saying his goodbyes to everybody. Like the answers that he's giving and the way in which he is delivering them, it was his kind of secret goodbye to everybody, it seems. But anyway, thank you all for joining us on the Seventh Rule. Stay tuned for the free-for-all. We will be right back.
All right.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Seventh Rule. This is the free-for-all. We've got Khaled Reza. We've got Commander Homer, Mr. Rex Wood, Kat R. King, very special guest, Melissa Longo, and, of course, Cirroc Lofton. My name is Ryan T. Husk. Again, it's the free-for-all. How's everybody doing?
All right.
Doing good. Doing good.
Fantastic.
Homer, your backdrop looks like I look like the bad angel whispering you to
yes
to do something.
So I talked a little bit about NaNoWriMo, and I think I need, in order to do better, I need that outfit next year for when I do some writing.
Oh yeah, that's the writing outfit right there.
Yeah, is this probably also the dating outfit that you would use as well?
Yes, and if you put the sports coat over it, it's also for the Oscars.
Oh, nice. It is sharp.
Yeah, it's sharp. It's also it's funny because they use a lot of thick fabrics, so it's thick. I don't know what else to say about that. Don't
usually when I hear thick,
don't make that face, Ryan. All right, never mind. Let me. Ryan makes that face.
I don't make it.
That means it's time to move on.
It's time to move on. Exactly. Thank you, Homer. Appreciate that.
So, actually,
Melissa, how have you been?
Oh,
nice
to miss you.
I've been okay. Peaks and valleys still.
Yeah. You got a new kitten.
I did get a new kitten.
Where is she?
She is zonked out on my bed upstairs. One of her moments of not wildness. So
you get about 10 minutes a day of peace, huh?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's been a sad year for our DS9 family, right? I mean, we just lost Rene Aubergenois, and just been a tough year.
And Marina's husband on the same day also passed away. Marina Sirtis, as you know, Counselor Troy. So we did kind of want to talk about that. I mean, our hearts and our condolences go out to Marina Sirtis and her family. It's very sudden, and I'm sure it's very difficult. But let's talk a little bit about Rene, and let's talk about your favorite Odo moments or your favorite Odo episodes to kind of pay homage to what an incredible actor he was, as all of his friends have been saying. Armin, Terry, Nana, all of them are talking about what a great mentor he was, what a great actor he was. So since Heather's not here for us to pick on and say to go first, by the way, Heather's at the doctor. She had a little thing going on, so get well soon, Heather, but she should be fine. All is well. Nothing to be concerned about.
That's good.
Cat, nothing to be concerned about.
No, don't say that. Like we just lost two more people in our circle and my family over the weekend as well. So it's just been really tough.
Sorry about that. So let's pick on Homer. Let's go with him first.
I was afraid you're going to do that. So I think there are a bunch, but the one that I'm going to choose, and I don't know the name of it, and in your rewatch, you haven't gotten to it yet, but it's the one where Odo transforms himself into like this encompassing mist or a cloud, expressing his love for Kira. So that image makes it my favorite. I mean, there are other ones where he's just plain snarky, which are great too, but I'm going to
like
go
a buffet
with
cart.
Yeah.
No, so you like that? He transforms himself into a mist or a cloud.
Yeah, it's like an orange sort of
what was he
goldish.
Doing? I assumed he was trying to like link with her. Like, was he trying to link with her, or what was he trying to do? But she was all like this. I was like, what's happening?
Yeah, I think it's the closest to a link that he could do. She couldn't link per se, but it was the most intimate I think he could be with her.
Okay.
What about you? What about you, Khaled?
Yeah, I actually had two, but I'll stick to one.
You can do two.
Okay. Overall, like I really love Odo's comedic timing as well. Like a lot of like the DS9, I mean, they just had really good comedy. But the two that stood out to me, they're a bit more dramatic. Is the scene where he, and this is why I love some of Odo's episodes, either with Starfleet or with the Changelings. Is when he found out basically Starfleet or Federation basically poisoned its people, which sent the virus. He was like, how convenient for the Federation that you guys are like all this and that and perfect, but like you guys don't mind Section 31. And, they got to do the dirty work. I felt like that was very powerful for me as a fan. Like I said, I didn't know Renee personally. I just knew him as Odo, and that really like impacted me when I first saw it, just because I felt like the Federation needs this kick in the boot to become better. The second thing that for me is that scene where with Lost, Lost is in the prison and he's having that little exchange with Lost. And in that situation, I think Lost is basically making a very good argument that I've applied in some of my own historical arguments. He's talking about they accept you because you look like them, you dress like them, you imitate them. But would they really accept you, if you were following your own thing, in a way, your own quote unquote religion or your own worldview instead of trying to imitate what they're trying to do. A lot of the stuff that I've researched and studied in intellectual history kind of reflects what he was saying, that regarding a lot of the worldviews that popped up within our world in the last 300 years. I'm not going to get into specifics because it's not about that. But those two scenes really always stuck out to me in Odo in terms of the dramatic aspects for me, just because it hit me on a personal mode, in my own life. That's really why.
What about you, Rex, who's wearing the awesome Darmok Picard jacket?
I guess my favorite episode has to be the one where, of course, he's in Quark's bar playing the piano. When he's first going after Kira, and wanting to get into that relationship with her, and actually has decided I'm going to go after her. Just the whole segment of him playing the piano, them singing together, just showing the love for each other that you see right there. I think that has to be probably one of my favorite ones with Odo. I really like that one a lot. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's a solid one.
Yep.
Melissa, how are you, Melissa? I know you've got a lot of good Odo moments.
Yeah, and I don't know if I can pick just one.
Pick 9, whatever.
I don't know that I can pick just one because he had so many wonderful moments over the 7 years. Odo was one of my favorite characters too, and his relationship with Kira had a huge impact with me. So I think that was an overall impression that I got. And then meeting him and him being always such a kind and gracious human being, but it's difficult to pick just one. So.
What about you, Kat? Can you narrow it down to one?
I have a few favorites, but one of my favorite moments is the vortex, and it's Quark and Odo, and Quark's like stopping to see if I'd run away, and then Odo just like snorts, and he's like, I couldn't get that lucky. I love that. Those moments with him and Quark are like just my favorites. Yeah, definitely. And I think the other one that stands out the most is probably If Wishes Were Horses, when he's announcing to everyone, like, he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, and all androgynous creatures, your attention, please. I'm going to have to ask you all to please refrain from using your imaginations." I just love that line. And
Yes.
he's right. He had
that was so subtle. That line was so subtle too. Like, you just
yeah. He was good to his delivery. Renee had wonderful ability to deliver those lines in just such a great way. And of course, everyone talked about him even before DS9's Benson. My mom was even telling me she loved that his role on that show. But as Odo, in terms of Odo, those are my top two favorite quotes.
Good ones. Cirroc?
Well, I don't know if I have a specific quote, but my overall memory was that of fear. I was fearful of Odo because it seemed as though he was there to chase me out of my hangout spot on the promenade. So I remember, like, early on, actually having it in my mind like he was an actual police officer. And the way that you're fearful of a police officer was the way that I was fearful of Odo. So I chose to stay out of his way, and when he came around, it was usually to tell me to shut up and get the hell out of here, right? So so it was kind of that throughout our relationship in that kind of a way. I mean, that was the dynamic of it, at least, where it was more of like, he was the security boss and I was going to stay out of his way, right? But the opposite side of that is what Khalid was talking about, which is the comedy aspect of Renee and who he was as a person. So he would play he could go to such extreme with his seriousness and his drama, but then yet he could also play the comedic aspect of it, and his timing was just so impeccable. So here he was able to play really such a broad range. Most people are either in one category or the other, and not in both, right? So the really good comedians lack the ability to do drama, and vice versa. But Renee had the really remarkable ability to just weave in and out of both of those, right? And he could be telling you something very serious and then end with a joke and then go right back to serious again.
Mm-hmm.
So he would, tell you the joke and then again follow it up with, but don't piss me off, right? So I like that. I like that aspect of his performances.
What I always liked was his every episode. He's got his weekly harumph. It doesn't matter where it is in the script, but somewhere. And that was a Renee special. I'll bet you in the script it doesn't say Odo harumphs. You know what I mean? Like, that the line said, "Not today, Quark," but in the way Renee would deliver is, "Not today, Quark." Whatever, The other thing that was always so great about him, obviously, was the banter between him and Quark, and like he would always be so serious and tough and stoic, and then every once in a while he'd put a tiny little smile when he'd win one over on Quark.
Yeah. What's interesting is, like, he always said, like, the mask, like, because he was such an expressive actor, the mask prevented him from fully being that way. But as I watched Odo, I never felt that. I felt like I can see what Odo is feeling. I can feel his expression, even though he's wearing this mask thing, prosthetic thing, So, man, he's good.
Mm.
Yeah, his eyes were always so expressive, and you could always see what Odo was thinking or feeling, even with the mask on. So, yeah, I agree.
Which was something that Cirroc and I were just talking about last week about what Aron did so well. I don't know if Cirroc, that's what you were going to jump in on, but that's
communicating with his eyes, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Aron was like, he had these big blue eyes, and it was so expressive. And when you're wearing all this stuff to, restrict your other facial expressions and your other movement, everything is coming out of the eyes, right? Mm-hmm. And Aron was just so good at that. He always, even outside of makeup, just as Aron Eisenberg would talk to you with these eyes, right? He'd be looking you directly in the eyes and communicating and expressing his feelings. And so Renee also did a great job of just using his eyes to express emotions. I actually was reminded of the episode that he did where he was stuck in the turbo lift with Majel.
I was going to mention that one too. That's so funny.
Right. And it was just the two of them in this small space, and you can see he was like, "Oh God, I can't wait to get out of here!" Right?
Yeah, and he's giving her all the reasons why it would never work between them. And then she's like, and the last part of it is he melts into a puddle right at the end of every 16 hours, and she's like, "I can swim."
Yeah, that's right. That was a great line.
Yeah,
a great line.
And just the anxiety, he was literally dying in there with having to be forced into a conversation with this girl that he didn't want to jump all over him. So I thought that was pretty awesome. I mean, he was just like I said, his range was just impeccable, and his background prior to coming to DS9 was extensive.
Yeah,
I mean, you talk about theater and other television shows and other work that he's done. So he was really this really well accomplished actor who I feel has really left his mark in Hollywood and show business, and I don't think he left this planet without having accomplished what he set out to do.
It's a full life.
Agreed.
That's great that you brought that up, Cirroc, because that's something that I don't know if people talk about enough, was the fact that Star Trek didn't make Renee. He was already well established and he's a very seasoned actor, and a lot of the actors looked up to him as a mentor. And maybe part of the reason that you were a little intimidated as a kid was because he wasn't like a new kid around the block. He showed up. He was a professional actor. He probably didn't even care what Star Trek was. They were happy to have him. And as Aron would always say, from the very first episode that we covered, he said that Odo was immediately an established character. Renee played him perfectly, and he was so impressed with him every single episode after episode after episode. Odo and Quark were the two Aron would always talk about.
Yeah, and one of the things that we talked about too, I wanted to share with you guys, but it was the fact that Ryan said every series has their Spock,
the outsider,
their outsider character, their character, that's like a Spock, and I feel like Odo was the Spock of Deep Space Nine. Mm-hmm. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I could agree with that. I could see that.
Yep.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I would definitely agree with that too. That he definitely was that kind of outside character, just like Spock was through all the the original stuff. He was that person that was kind of outside the group a little bit. And I think that's exactly what Odo was too. Was the exact same thing. So I would definitely agree with you on that.
Yeah, and there's also a way this kind of logic, as being the basis for your decision making. This real base logic, right?
Right.
And you see that with Spock. You see that with Data.
Yeah.
You see that with Odo. You know.
Yeah.
Well, and with Odo and the way that he couldn't show expressions as well as he wanted to with his face. Mm-hmm. It was kind of that same thing with Spock not being able to show emotions either. Odo couldn't really show emotions as well as he could with his face as he wanted to. So I think that kind of brings that into line too.
Yeah. And Renee, even in the documentary, when Renee speaks about, remember, has everyone here seen the documentary?
Yeah, I have.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
So when they're reading the hate mail that they were getting during the show.
Oh yeah.
And Renee speaks about that. I was surprised at how emotional his reaction was at that time to receiving that mail, because he said it really hurt. Any actor, and I act. Anyone who's an artist is sensitive to a certain extent. But I just you never wanted to imagine Renee being that kind of a guy. But when you see him have this moment where he shares how deeply it hurt him, because everybody there was there to do a good job, and everybody wanted to just do the best they could, and to receive such, viciously worded, letters from people, and that hurt me too, to see that, and it really moved me that everyone on that show really really cared about it, whether they were Star Trek fans before they got their roles. Then once they had them, they took them very seriously, and he was like you say, a consummate professional, and he just closed that play. And so it was just, for me, it seemed sudden. It seemed sudden still, even though he had been fighting that cancer for a while.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Homer?
And Chef Louis. we had just joked about his Chef Louis in Little Mermaid. My students and I. That's how they recognize him.
Oh yeah. He. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Oh man. And I just found this out, and I've watched Little Mermaid since it came out, right, in the 90s. I never knew it.
I haven't seen it in ages.
But, you can never forget that voice, right?
Never. There's a pop doll. You can get a Funko Pop for Chef Louis now.
Oh. And, but the one thing that really stands out to me also in this, in this kind of hindsight way is the documentary. Mm-hmm. And how it took advantage of this kind of last opportunity that we didn't know was a last opportunity to get Aron on screen talking about his time, to get Renee to sum up his experience, and it's just like, it makes the documentary seem so much different when you watch it now.
Yeah.
Right? It just changes like the meaning of it even to another exponential level.
Yeah. Agree.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Because I think you mentioned Cirroc back a few months ago about just Renee and how he was talking in the documentary. And that it was kind of a premonition that something was going on. And so when this happened, it was kind of like, wow, his statements that he made during that, kind of had an idea of what was going on, I think. Or things.
Yeah, he talked about his obituary in the documentary and how he would be remembered. And that's, that was pretty poignant when I saw it, and then watching, Aron Eisenberg talking about killing his character. Is another thing that's like, this is hard to swallow when you watch it again, right? So it's I'm sad about it, but I'm also glad that the documentary was made and that they were able to get these messages out and get these interviews on camera, and it's just really hard.
Absolutely.
Agree.
Yep. Absolutely.
Homer, you seem to make a couple faces when we mentioned The Little Mermaid. Have you seen it?
No, I was just thinking that we should have a rewatch party.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, maybe.
Just for that scene. Just that scene.
Yeah.
Just the song. It'll be fine.
No, I remember. So there was Star Trek Mission New York 3 years ago, and I met Renee for the first time there, and I was just talking about how I enjoyed his character, and how he was able to convey so much with the prosthetics and stuff. And he said, "Well, then it's kind of like you're putting your body into it a little bit more." So I think if we go back and look and pay attention to his acting, it's not just going to be the eyes, but there's going to be a subtle inclination, or he's going to be doing some things with his hands a little bit too. And I got a bucket, so really good. He was, he was big into
you're right.
supporting.
He did a lot of leaning forward, posturing with his hands behind his back. There's a lot of that, yeah.
Sort of like what the guy is playing the Mandalorian right now is sort of contending with.
What's his name? Pedro Pascal, yeah?
Yeah, Pedro. Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he doesn't even get to use his eyes because he's got the visor.
It's just the head movement.
Shield.
It's just tone of voice and body movement.
That's right.
That's all these actors, and they have to figure out a way to do it. Our buddy Doug Jones does it too, and he does it so well. And that's what happens.
Thank God for those pantomiming lessons I had in theater when I was in school.
Yeah, they actually make you put a bucket over your head and just to see how well you move your neck, and that's how you get the job.
I could believe that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's true or not. I can't tell.
I couldn't believe it, but
Isn't that what the Mandalorian? The Mandalorian is wearing a bucket. I think.
It's hard to read his eyes to tell.
Yeah.
Well,
Ira shades on right now.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? I also before we go, I want to give a shout out to DC Fontana, who also was an amazing trendsetter for women and women in sci-fi.
Yep.
And she deserves her praise too, as well, for her contributions to the community and what she's given us.
Yeah.
So this year we will have lost, Peter Allen Fields, DC Fontana, Aron Eisenberg, and now Renee Aubergenois. So we've taken a hit on the writing side and the stars of the show. So
there's also the actor that played Charlie X in an original series episode. And Marina's husband. I mean, it's been it's been a tough one. Let's just get through December.
Yeah, really.
Let's pray that it's the end. Let's pray for the families of everybody who's dealing with this loss, including you, Melissa. We pray for you, and we just hope that this is enough for a while. Let's take a break and give us some time to heal.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for joining us, Melissa. That's really cool. I know you got a lot going on.
No, it's my pleasure. Anytime.
And we hope that you're going to watch some of these Nog episodes with us and give us some feedback, because we'd love to hear from you on it.
I would love to. Yes. Yep.
Awesome.
So do you guys
do rewatch and reviews of the CNF episodes?
Do you have a watch party? Do you guys all get together and watch them as one, or is it separately and then you compare notes? How does it, if you can divulge secrets like that.
Cirroc, do you watch the episodes? We'll start with you.
I do watch the episodes, and I make my little note sheets like this.
No, he's talking.
Included with pictures.
I like it.
Writer and artist.
Writer and a scholar.
And a doodler.
That's how I do it.
That's Jake Sisko, ladies and gentlemen.
That's how I prep for the show, ladies and gentlemen. By doodling pictures of Ferengis.
Cool. And thank you so much, Khalid, too. You guys will see his CNF episode later on in a few days.
It gave us some good insight, too, man, especially when it comes to that Ferengi word. Which
no spoilers, Rock.
All
Wait,
right,
what?
I won't say anything.
The F word.
You got to stay tuned.
Ryan has a new name. Ryan has a new nickname. That's all I'll say.
Oh,
there it is.
That's true. That's the good tease right there.
That is a good tease.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for Imo Radke, for Rex Wood, and Homer Frizzell, for Dennis Koch, Russ Hasledge, Kadar King, Heather Jordan, Melissa Longo, of course, Khaled Reza, for Cirroc Lofton and the coolest dude in the world, Aron Eisenberg. My name is Ryan T. Husk. Always remember the 7th rule.
Oh, man.
They got you from the grave.
I didn't know if it was something that should have been recorded or not, so I waited till
the one
after.
finger wave.
That's right.
Just number one.
Wow, number one. He got me again. Oh, man.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you very much. Thank you for keeping that going there, Homer.
Bet.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
Man.
That's not my nose.
The bracelet came today, by the way. The bracelet came today.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Yeah.
I like the way you covered it, Homer. You kind of slid over. It's just a holiday.
I did test it out beforehand to make sure where I had to be. So I was like, there's the spot. There's the spot.
There it is.
It's just a holodeck.
You were on Cirroc, so we had to.
That was good. That was a good one.
So in the actual picture,
there's still like 100 of those wristbands floating around.
Good.
And still got a bunch.
Yeah.
Bunches, so.
Yeah. They're great.
We'll bring them to
That's
Vegas.
awesome.
Yeah. Yep.
All right.